"Officers, remove him. People like that don't belong in a place like this." The words didn't fall, they detonated. They echoed against marble floors and chandeliers, loud enough for every guest in the grand lobby to hear. Two uniformed officers moved without hesitation. Each gripped an arm of Jamal Rivers, a man dressed not for spectacle but for quiet presence, a gray overcoat draped over his shoulders, black turtleneck sharp against his skin. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He let the moment unfold like a trial he already knew the verdict of. Behind the front desk, a woman in a crimson blazer smiled with rehearsed courtesy, as if humiliation were part of her job description. Guests in designer coats looked up from their cocktails, some whispering, some reaching for their phones. The chandelier above glared down on it all, turning the scene into theater. The manager's voice cut again, harder this time. "Escort him out before he embarrasses us further." The officers pulled Jamal forward. His steps were steady, not dragged. His silence was heavy, not empty. To the onlookers, he looked like a man misplaced in luxury. To himself, he looked like déjà vu. He remembered being 25, stopped outside a conference hall he had paid for, told by a guard, "Not in that suit, you don't." He remembered at 32, denied entry to a gala he sponsored, the usher insisting, "Check the guest list again, sir. That can't be you." And now, years later, billions later, here it was again, the same script, new actors. In the corner of the lobby, a young traveler lifted her phone high. "I'm streaming this," she whispered, voice trembling with anger. Another guest muttered, "He gave them his ID. Why are they doing this?" Jamal's eyes didn't flinch. He looked neither at the officers nor at the crowd. He stared straight ahead, jaw set, as if anchoring himself against the tide of prejudice rushing over marble and glass. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Jamal. The officers tightened their grip. The lobby air thickened, humming with discomfort. Somewhere a champagne flute clinked, awkwardly loud in the tension. The woman in red at the desk smirked. "Guests of this level don't dress like that." Her voice dripped with disdain. Each syllable meant to shrink him further. But Jamal didn't shrink. His silence filled the room louder than her words, and though he walked as if led out, every step carried the weight of a man who knew he was not being removed, he was setting the stage. Because in moments, the entire hotel would learn whose name was carved above its doors. Jamal Rivers had chosen this night with intention. No entourage, no assistant wheeling glossy luggage, no luxury car idling outside. He arrived alone, walking through revolving glass doors into the most expensive hotel on the city's Golden Mile. He carried nothing but a slim leather portfolio and the weight of history that clung to his shoulders. In a lobby filled with fragrance from orchids and polished wood, he looked deliberately ordinary. The gray coat draped across his frame was sharp but not ostentatious. His shoes were clean, not designer. His presence was calm, not loud. The staff never knew who they were dealing with because he didn't want them to know. Tonight was a test. He had ordered his assistant to make the booking under his own name. No hidden entities, no corporate shell. Just Jamal Rivers. A penthouse suite reserved online like any other traveler. He wanted to see whether the service matched the glossy brochures or the ugly whispers he had been hearing. Because the whispers mattered. Over the last 6 months, emails and messages had trickled into his office anonymous complaints, dismissed reviews, ignored calls. Guests of color quietly reported being treated as if they were trespassing in buildings his company owned. Jamal had read them all, and tonight he wanted proof. So when the front desk clerk scanned his ID earlier and frowned, he stayed silent. When she passed his black card to the manager and whispered with a smile that looked more like suspicion, he stayed silent. He wasn't surprised when the manager muttered loud enough for the marble walls to carry, "This doesn't look right. Guests like this don't book the penthouse." He didn't argue, he didn't protest. Because Jamal knew prejudice doesn't need volume, it thrives on assumption. Now, as the officers led him toward the gilded doors, Jamal's mind wasn't racing in panic. It was cataloging. Every glance, every smirk, every word loud enough to echo, but quiet enough the staff thought it sounded professional. He was collecting evidence, not defending himself. The chandelier hummed above with electric light, glittering across marble like an audience of tiny eyes. Guests whispered at cocktail tables, shifting in their velvet seats. Some leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. Others looked down, guilty in their silence. And just one lifted her phone higher, her live stream carrying the truth beyond the lobby walls. Jamal walked steady, letting the scene play exactly as he needed. Tonight wasn't about a reservation, it was about revelation. Because every humiliation etched into this lobby was another brick in the case he was building. And when the reveal came, it wouldn't just be about proving he belonged, it would be about proving who truly didn't. The manager's shoes clicked sharp against the marble as he strode closer, his posture rigid, his voice carrying across the lobby like a gavel. "Check him again. Cards like that don't belong in hands like his," he said, not bothering to lower his tone. He wanted the guests to hear. He wanted them to nod, to agree, to look at Jamal and see not a client but a problem. The desk clerk obeyed, sliding Jamal's black card under the scanner once more. The screen flashed green, instantly approved. But the clerk didn't announce it. Instead, she leaned toward the manager, whispering, and they both smirked as if technology had betrayed them, but their prejudice hadn't. "This looks counterfeit," the manager said louder now, holding the card between two fingers as though it might stain him. "Security, hold it for verification." The nearest officer stepped forward, plucking the card from Jamal's hand without warning. He tucked it into a leather pouch at his belt, like evidence. Around the room, guests stirred. A woman in a sequined gown raised her brows at her companion. A young man in a suit shook his head and muttered, "That's his card. You saw it work." But neither stepped forward. Behind the counter, the clerk added with a thin smile, "Sir, people try this every week. They flash fake IDs, stolen credit cards. It's a policy to remove them before they disturb paying guests." Jamal said nothing. His silence unsettled them more than protest would have. The manager pressed harder. "Escorting you out is for everyone's safety," he declared. "Luxury is earned, not impersonated." His voice dripped with certainty, the kind that comes not from truth but from years of never being challenged. One of the officers tightened his grip on Jamal's arm, pulling him closer toward the exit. The motion was firm but not brutal. It didn't need to be. The humiliation wasn't in the force, it was in the spectacle. From the far corner, the young traveler still filming whispered into her phone, "This is wrong." He gave them ID. They're ignoring it. Her livestream counter ticked upward 20, then 40, then 60 viewers. A quiet swell of digital witnesses forming in real time. Jamal's jaw remained set. Inside, he noted every phrase: counterfeit, impersonated, not earned. Words dressed up as procedure but naked in bias. He'd heard them before in different rooms, from different mouths. And every time, they built the same case. The lobby, once filled with polished serenity, now buzzed with unease. Glasses clinked too loudly. A child whispered to her mother, "Why are they taking him away?" The mother hushed her quickly, eyes darting to the officers. The red-blazered clerk leaned forward once more, lips curling into something colder than a smile. "Guests of this level don't dress like that," she said. "You'll be more comfortable somewhere else." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an exile. Jamal didn't respond. He let the words hang heavy in the room, like smoke no one wanted to breathe but everyone could smell. And in that silence, the scene shifted from routine check-in to public trial. Because now, everyone in the lobby knew this wasn't about a reservation anymore. It was about belonging. The officer's grip tightened around Jamal's arm. The lobby air was thick now. Every sound amplified the shuffle of polished shoes, the faint crackle from the chandelier bulbs, the nervous cough of a guest who wished to be anywhere else. But Jamal did not resist. He did not plead. He stood, shoulders squared, gaze steady, as if his silence was the loudest objection in the room. The manager mistook it for weakness. "See," he said, projecting his voice so the crowd could hear, "he has nothing to say." That's because he knows exactly what he's doing. His tone was smug, like a prosecutor certain of a guilty verdict before the trial began. The clerk chimed in, "Counterfeit card holders never argue. They hope we'll let them slip away quietly." Her words struck sharp, meant to pierce. Still, Jamal said nothing. His breath was calm, measured, the kind of breath a man takes not to endure shame but to gather power. Behind him, whispers multiplied. "Why isn't he saying anything?" a guest murmured. "If he's innocent, shouldn't he fight back?" another voice countered. Or maybe he doesn't need to. Look at him. He's not flustered. The traveler with the live stream raised her phone higher. They're humiliating him in front of everyone, she said to her viewers. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from anger. Comments began flooding her screen, though no one in the lobby could see them yet. This looks wrong. Don't stop recording. Jamal's eyes flicked briefly toward the chandelier, its crystals scattering light like fragments of judgment. For a moment, his mind traveled backward. 20 years ago, at a small hotel in Atlanta, he'd been told the system was down after presenting his ID. He'd waited 2 hours while staff laughed behind the counter, only to sleep in his car that night. That memory lived inside him, not as a wound but as fuel. Tonight, it burned steady, not wild. The manager grew impatient with the quiet. "Escort him out now," he barked at the officers. "This establishment cannot be disrupted by fraud." The officers adjusted their stance, one hand near his shoulder, the other nudging toward the door. But Jamal's feet didn't move. He remained rooted, like stone set in marble. His silence unsettled them more than resistance would have. A guest near the bar whispered louder than he meant to. "He hasn't even raised his voice." Another replied, "That's what scares them. He doesn't look desperate." "Foreign," the clerk tapped her pen against the desk, irritated. "Sir, your refusal to cooperate proves everything. If you were legitimate, you'd be defending yourself." Jamal finally turned his head, just slightly. His eyes met hers, unblinking. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of his gaze was an answer in itself. An answer that said, "Your words cannot define me." The silence stretched. It filled every corner of the lobby, pressing against glass walls and velvet curtains. Even the officers hesitated, caught between orders and the sense that this man was not what they assumed. And then, with deliberate calm, Jamal inhaled once, exhaled once, and lowered his chin slightly as if to say, "I will not break. I will not bend. I will let you write this scene exactly as you wish, because in moments, I will rewrite the ending." The manager scoffed, mistaking stillness for surrender. But those watching began to sense the opposite. Something unspoken had shifted. The room was no longer certain who held control. Jamal hadn't said a word, yet the silence already belonged to him. The first sound wasn't from Jamal, it was from the corner. A young woman in travel-worn jeans, phone lifted high, whispered into her mic, "I'm recording this. This is wrong." Her live stream counter ticked past 100 viewers, comments flaring across her screen faster than she could read. He gave them his ID. Why are they dragging him out? Stay live. The manager noticed, his voice cutting sharp. "Ma'am, put that down. Filming isn't allowed on private property." But it was too late. Half the lobby had already seen her screen glowing. A murmur rose, rippling like water disturbed. At the bar, a man in a tailored Navy suit leaned toward his friend. He didn't fight back. He just stood there. "That's not what a con does." His friend nodded slowly, conflicted. Glass paused halfway to his lips. A concierge trainee, barely older than 20, stood behind a podium near the elevators. Her eyes darted between Jamal, the manager, and the officers. Finally, she stepped forward, voice shaky but audible. "I saw his name in the system earlier today. The reservation was valid." The manager snapped around, eyes blazing. "Quiet. You're mistaken. Return to your station." But her words had landed. Guests exchanged glances. One elderly couple whispered to each other, lips tight with disapproval. A young father holding his daughter whispered, "She said it was valid. Why are they ignoring her?" The clerk at the desk rolled her eyes. "Trainees make mistakes. Protocol is what matters." The tension was no longer confined to the confrontation. It seeped into the crowd. People adjusted in their chairs, phones lifted discreetly. The sense that something was off had spread like a draft through velvet curtains. The live streamer spoke louder now. "Look at him. He hasn't resisted once. They took his card, his ID, and still they're calling him a fraud. How does that make sense?" The officer holding Jamal's arm shifted uneasily, as if her words pricked at the edges of his certainty. Jamal remained still, eyes forward, every second of silence sharpening into testimony. A guest near the grand piano, who had been silent until now, rose to his feet. "Why are you treating him like this?" His voice was steady, his accent European, his tone indignant. "This is not how you treat a paying guest." The manager stiffened. "Sir, please sit down. We are protecting the integrity of this establishment." But the man didn't sit. Integrity. he repeated, his voice louder now. It looks more like discrimination. The word hung heavy in the air, heavier than marble columns or chandeliers. Guests inhaled sharply, as if someone had broken a rule far more sacred than protocol, the rule of silence. Phones lifted higher, conversations hushed. The room itself seemed to lean in, waiting. Jamal hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. But the witnesses had begun to speak for him. And that was the first fracture in the hotel's armor. The manager's jaw tightened. Witnesses were speaking now, and that was dangerous. He stepped forward, his polished shoes snapping against marble, his voice cutting through the lobby like a blade. "This man is not a guest," he declared, pointing toward Jamal as if labeling evidence. "He is attempting to commit fraud inside this establishment. Security, remove him at once." The officer holding Jamal's card nodded stiffly, pulling a radio from his belt. The crackle of static echoed through the chamber, summoning more guards. The sound alone deepened the unease like the prelude to a storm. The clerk leaned in, her smile sharp. "He's already caused enough disruption. Imagine what he'll do if we let him stay." Her tone wasn't cautious. It was poisonous, pitched just loud enough for guests to overhear. The young trainee by the podium shook her head. "But his reservation—" "Silence," the manager snapped, his glare slicing across the room. "One more word, and you're out of a job." "Why?" The trainee froze, lips pressed tight, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Guests had seen her courage, and now they saw her fear. Across the room, the live streamer's phone buzzed. The viewer count passed 300, comments exploding. "This is racism. Stay live. Don't let them cover this up." She whispered into the mic. "They're calling security now. He hasn't done a thing." A guest in a white linen suit rose from his chair, voice sharp. "You're humiliating him in front of everyone. He gave you ID. He gave you his card. And you," he pointed at the clerk, "are still calling him a fraud?" The clerk scoffed, arms folded. "We've seen this before. Fake cards, fake bookings. People like him think they can buy their way in." The words landed like stones hurled into silence. People like him. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Even the officers exchanged a glance. Jamal still hadn't spoken. His calm presence contrasted so violently with the noise around him that the imbalance grew unbearable. The manager tried to fill it, raising his voice higher. "Listen, everyone," he said to the lobby, arms spread wide. "This is a 5-star property. We uphold standards. We cannot allow individuals to disrupt the dignity of this place." A murmur spread, skeptical and sharp. "Standards?" one woman muttered. "Since when is dignity measured in skin color?" Another guest shook his head. "This is shameful," but the manager pressed harder, voice rising with desperation. "Security will escort him out. This establishment doesn't tolerate deception. If you are all real guests, you should thank us for protecting your space." It was the wrong choice of words, because now, the divide wasn't between Jamal and the staff, it was between the staff and the crowd. The chandelier above flickered slightly, as if the building itself had caught the tension. The velvet air thickened, every guest holding their breath. Phones hovered higher. No one was silent anymore. And in that swell of voices, it became clear. The more the manager shouted, the less power he held. Jamal, unmoving, silent, steady, was winning without speaking. The radio crackled again, sharper this time. 2 additional guards stepped into the lobby, their black uniforms cutting through the crowd. The manager's voice boomed, dripping with false authority. "Officers, detain him. This man is a fraud. He has no right to stand here." The nearest guard reached for Jamal's shoulder. The movement was fast, practiced like pulling a trespasser from a restricted zone. Gasps erupted across the room. The clerk seized her chance. She leaned over the desk, grabbed the black card from the officer's pouch, and held it up like stolen treasure. "This card is company property now," she announced. "It will remain locked until verification." 2. Then, in a move that split the room in half, she dropped the card into a steel box beneath the desk and slammed it shut with a metallic finality. The sound was louder than it should have been, louder than a drawer closing. It echoed like a verdict. Guests recoiled. A man at the bar muttered, "That's theft." A woman clutching pearls whispered, "They just stole from him." The manager didn't flinch. He fed the fire. "Security, put him in cuffs. He's wasting our time." "Said." The younger officer hesitated. "Sir, he hasn't resisted." "Cuffs!" the manager barked, his voice cracking. And so the guard obeyed. A metal clasp clicked open, glinting under chandelier light. The sight of handcuffs in the grand lobby turned unease into outrage. The live streamer's voice rose, trembling. "They're about to arrest him for trying to check into his room. Look at this." "Look at it." Her viewer count surged past 1,000, comments scrolling too fast to read. "Illegal. Racist. Stay live. Don't stop." The trainee near the podium stepped forward again, courage trembling in her voice. "This is wrong. His reservation is valid. I saw it myself this morning." The manager spun on her, finger stabbing the air. "You are done. Pack your things. You're finished here." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't step back. "I won't lie for you," she whispered, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. The crowd murmured. Phones lifted higher. Lines had been drawn. And then came the final insult. One of the guards shoved Jamal's leather portfolio from his hands. It tumbled to the marble floor, papers scattering like confetti at a funeral. The clerk sneered. "Forged documents. That's all this is." A child near the fountain cried out, "Stop!" Her father pulled her close, glaring at the staff. The lobby was no longer polished serenity. It was a courtroom, a theater, a battleground. Guests leaned forward, not in curiosity but in judgment against the staff. And Jamal? He still hadn't spoken. He bent slowly, gathered his scattered papers with deliberate calm, and stood tall again. His silence was volcanic now. Every insult hurled at him, every theft of dignity, every false accusation at all, stacked like pressure beneath the surface. The manager smirked, believing he had won. But the smarter guests, the ones watching closely, saw something different in Jamal's eyes. Not defeat, not fear, a storm waiting to break. Jamal straightened, papers once more in hand, though the corners were creased from their fall. He brushed the dust of the marble off his sleeve, not hurried, not shaken. The hush that followed the insult was almost reverent, as if the room itself sensed the turn. Then, without raising his voice, Jamal pulled a slim black phone from his coat pocket. His thumb unlocked it with a silent press. The manager scoffed. "Go ahead. Call whoever you think can save you. It won't matter." But Jamal wasn't calling for rescue. He pressed one button speed dial. The line connected instantly. His tone was calm, measured, almost ceremonial. "Activate shutdown protocol," he said. Every word was deliberate, carried on the air like a commandment. On the other end, a female voice answered briskly, "Confirmed. Do you want escalation to full lockdown?" "Yes," Jamal replied. "Log everything from the moment security touched me. Timestamp it. Secure the footage." The guards holding him froze. The words didn't sound like panic. They sounded like authority. The live streamer whispered to her phone. "He just said, shutdown protocol." Her viewer count doubled in seconds. Comments blazed. "What does that mean? He's not scared at all. This feels bigger than it looks." The manager laughed, brittle and forced. "Cute performance. Who do you think you're talking to? Some fantasy boardroom?" But Jamal didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes stayed fixed ahead, as if addressing something larger than the lobby, larger than the moment. "Begin access audit," he continued into the phone. "Flag every employee code tied to this property. Effective immediately." "Understood," the voice confirmed. System responding. The younger guard shifted uneasily. "Sir, what's happening?" he whispered toward the manager. The manager hissed back, "He's bluffing, he has nothing." But his words didn't sound like conviction anymore. They sounded like denial. The clerk slammed her palm on the desk. "This is a waste of time. Just get him out already." Jamal finally turned his head toward her. His expression was calm, almost pitying. Then, into the phone, he said, "Note, front desk clerk interfered with guest verification. Attempted seizure of personal property. Tag for immediate review." "Yes, Mr. Rivers," came the reply. Gasps scattered through the lobby. A couple near the fountain froze. A man in a tailored suit blinked. "Mr. Rivers?" The manager paled, his smirk faltering. "Wait, what did she just call you?" But Jamal didn't answer. Not yet. His silence was still the weapon. His phone remained at his side, glowing faintly like a torch in darkness. Guests leaned forward, anticipation buzzing through the air. Something irreversible had just begun. And the staff, the ones who moments earlier stood so tall, now shifted on their feet, unease creeping into their posture. They didn't know it yet, but the ground beneath them had started to give way. Jamal hadn't raised his voice once. Yet the counterattack was already unfolding, precise and unstoppable. The storm had broken its silence. The lobby had gone so quiet that even the fizz of champagne in half-filled glasses could be heard. Dozens of eyes locked on Jamal, on the phone still glowing in his hand, on the calm that unsettled everyone who had mocked him minutes earlier. The manager broke first. His voice cracked across the marble. "What game are you playing? Who do you think you are?" Jamal finally turned, facing him directly. His gaze was steady, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of iron. "I am not a guest you can discard," he said. "I am not a fraud you can parade for your convenience." The manager scoffed, but his posture betrayed the tremor in his hands. "Then who?" Jamal's words cut through him, sharp and final. "My name is Jamal Rivers, CEO of Horizon Global." The declaration didn't need volume. It didn't need theatrics. It landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples surging through every corner of the lobby. Gasps erupted. Phones shot higher into the air. The live streamer nearly dropped hers, whispering to her audience, "Did you hear that? He's the CEO. The CEO." Her comment feed exploded. "No way. Look it up now. It's real. Horizon Global owns this hotel chain." The clerk's face drained of color, her smirk collapsing into disbelief. She stammered, "That's impossible. You're lying." "Well," but Jamal didn't bother to respond to her. He lifted the phone again. "Confirm property ownership structure," he instructed. The voice on the other end answered crisply, "This property is part of Horizon Global Hospitality, fully owned subsidiary. Executive authority vested in Jamal Rivers, CEO." The room erupted again, not in chaos, but in awe. Guests leaned to one another, whispering fiercely, "He owns the hotel." They tried to throw out the man who pays their salaries. "This is unreal." "Though Ken." The trainee at the podium took a bold step forward, her voice clearer than before. "I told you, his reservation was valid. He belongs here more than anyone." The manager staggered backward a step, his certainty collapsing. This changes nothing," he stuttered. "You still disrupted." "No," Jamal interrupted, his voice calm but cutting. "You disrupted this place. You profiled me. You humiliated me. In the very lobby that carries my name on its deed." "Hen." The chandelier above seemed to pulse with the energy of the crowd, light scattering across phones now recording every word. "You thought silence meant submission," Jamal said, eyes locking on the manager. "But silence was simply patience, and now your time is up." The live stream count surged into the thousands. Screens across the city lit up with his face, his words, the staff's stunned expressions. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. The man they had tried to remove did not just belong. He ruled the ground beneath their feet. The moment Jamal's title echoed through the lobby, the floor seemed to shift beneath everyone's feet. Authority reversed itself in an instant. Those who had smirked now paled. Those who had whispered in doubt now whispered in awe. The clerk's hands trembled on the desk, her fingers twitching as though the glossy wood beneath them might burn. She glanced toward the steel box where Jamal's card was locked away. For the first time, she looked afraid of touching it. The guards who had gripped Jamal's arms moments before loosened their hold, stepping back with uncertain glances. One muttered under his breath, "CEO?" as if the word itself could undo the metal cuff still dangling uselessly from his belt. The trainee at the podium exhaled, relief and vindication mixing on her face. She wasn't trembling anymore. She straightened, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the manager with something close to defiance. The guests responded too. Applause burst suddenly from the bar, hesitant at first, then spreading like wildfire. Phones lifted higher. Voices rang out. "We saw everything. It's all on camera. You profiled your own boss." The manager's face drained of its confident color. He stepped back, then forward, as if caught in a loop, trying to hold ground that no longer existed. His voice cracked when he tried to salvage it. This is a misunderstanding, a mix-up." But no one was listening anymore. The live streamer's phone shook in her hand as she narrated to thousands now watching live. "They tried to throw out the CEO of the hotel he owns. This is happening right now." Comments flooded. "Fire them all. Justice in real time. I'm sharing this everywhere." The chandelier above blazed brighter, as though the light itself chose sides. Every guest who had been silent felt emboldened, their murmurs swelling into chants. A man near the fountain shouted, "Apologize to him." A woman echoed, "Shame on you." The manager looked around wildly. His staff, once his allies, were faltering. The clerk's face was frozen in horror. The guards shifted their weight nervously, unwilling to touch Jamal again. Even the officers who had first escorted him in glanced toward each other, silently debating retreat. And Jamal? He hadn't moved an inch. His stillness only magnified the chaos unraveling around him. It was as if the entire room was crumbling against the calm gravity of his presence. The manager tried one last line of defense, voice brittle. You can't fire me on the spot. There's protocol. But the word protocol landed hollow, mocked by the very guests who had witnessed his abuse of it minutes earlier. Laughter rippled bitterly through the crowd. The tide had turned. The staff were no longer in control. The guests were no longer complicit. Every camera lens, every pair of eyes, now pressed down on the people who had stood so tall against Jamal. And the realization swept through them like cold fire. They hadn't just insulted a man. They had tried to erase the owner of the empire that signed their checks. The crisis wasn't coming. It was already here. Jamal lifted his phone again, his voice still calm, still unshaken. "Initiate termination," he said. The words struck sharper than any shout. On the other end, the same female voice responded instantly, "Confirmed. Which accounts?" Jamal's eyes never left the manager. Gregory Vance, front desk clerk Lauren Hayes, security officer on duty, Kevin Patel. Effective immediately. Revoke access. Freeze credentials. There was no pause, no hesitation. The system answered with a cold, clinical tone. Processing now. In the space of a heartbeat, the manager's phone buzzed red. His hotel ID card, clipped proudly to his jacket pocket, emitted a shrill beep, then a dull glow. He fumbled with it, swiping it against the desk terminal. Access denied. The clerk tried the same, her fingers shaking. Her ID flashed red. The guard who had cuffed Jamal just minutes earlier tapped his badge. Nothing. The reality hit them all at once. They weren't employees anymore. They weren't even insiders. They were outsiders in the very building where they had strutted with authority. Guests erupted into applause, some even laughing in disbelief. "He shut them out," one shouted. Another lifted his phone higher. "This is history. Live justice." The live streamer nearly screamed into her mic. "He fired them, right here, in front of everyone." Her feed rocketed into the tens of thousands, comments flooding. "I've never seen power like this." Justice served. "This is how you end discrimination." The manager staggered forward, desperation spilling from his words. You can't do this. You can't humiliate us like this in public." Jamal's eyes narrowed, his voice still quiet. "Humiliation?" He let the word linger, heavy. "You took my card. You called me a fraud. You ordered me out of my own property. You humiliated yourselves." The clerk's knees buckled slightly. She clutched the desk for balance, but it no longer felt like hers to hold. The guard backed away, eyes lowered, shame pulling at his shoulders. The young trainee stood taller now, her voice rising above the chaos. "He gave you every chance to do the right thing. You chose this." The guests clapped harder, phones recording from every angle. Some whistled, some shouted, "Justice." Others simply stood, stunned, watching history fold into a lobby scene. Jamal lowered his phone, sliding it calmly back into his coat pocket. His gaze swept the room, not gloating, not smiling. "This house," he said, voice firm, "was built to welcome, not to exclude, and anyone who forgets that truth has no place under its roof." His words fell like judgment, irreversible and final. The staff he named were already locked out of the system. Their reign of arrogance ended in less than a minute, and the crowd, once complicit, once silent, was now his jury, his witness, his choir of approval. The verdict had been delivered. The lobby was still vibrating with applause when Jamal stepped forward, not toward the doors where they had tried to drag him, but toward the very desk where the insults began. His footsteps echoed steady against marble, each one louder than the manager's earlier shouts. The former staff, now just figures stripped of their badges, stumbled aside. They had no authority left, no shield of policy to hide behind. Guests pulled out of their way, not to protect them, but to clear the path for the man they had tried to erase. Jamal placed his leather portfolio gently on the desk, as if reclaiming what had always been his. He didn't slam it. He didn't need to. His composure was sharper than any outburst. He turned to the crowd, dozens of guests, phones raised, faces lit by a mixture of awe and vindication. He spoke not to the disgraced staff, but to them, and to every eye watching through screens across the world. "You all witnessed this," he said. His voice was steady, low, but carried like iron through the room. "You saw how quickly dignity can be stolen. How easily someone can be labeled a fraud for looking the way I look, for standing the way I stand." No one breathed. Jamal continued, "They thought silence meant surrender. But silence can mean preparation. Silence can mean power. And when the time is right, silence ends." The live streamer whispered into her mic, "This is the part you'll never forget." Her comment feed surged goosebumps. "Speak the truth. This is history." Jamal's gaze swept the lobby once more, falling last on the steel box beneath the desk, the one that held his card, the symbol of the insult. Without raising a hand, he spoke into his phone again. "Unlock vault. Restore card." A click sounded. The drawer slid open on its own command. The black card lay inside, untouched now, its sheen unbroken. A young concierge lifted it gently and handed it back to him, bowing her head. Jamal slipped the card into his portfolio, then closed it with deliberate calm. He looked at the crowd one final time. "This isn't about a card, or a room, or even this hotel," he said. "It's about who gets told they don't belong. And tonight, you saw the truth. Those words never had power. Not over me. Not over anyone who refuses to shrink." 1 to 60. His final sentence fell like a gavel. "You tried to throw me out of my own house, but tonight the doors close on you." Applause thundered, rolling through marble and glass. Some guests rose to their feet. Others shouted, "Justice!" Phones streamed the moment across continents. Jamal picked up his portfolio, adjusted his coat, and walked toward the elevators, not escorted, not stopped, but followed only by the sound of reverence. The lobby that had tried to expel him now stood as his witness. And for everyone who watched inside that hotel or through a glowing screen, the message was clear. Power does not beg. Power does not shout. Power simply stands.